Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co., and today I'm reviewing Foundations of Metropolis from Arcane Wonders. Foundations of Metropolis is a 2 to 4 player polyomino area control game, and if at any point during this review I refer to this as Foundations of Rome, I apologize, I sometimes get those two confused. We will talk about the differences between the two games. But with that said, let's talk about briefly how this game works. I've already reviewed Foundations of Rome, which is basically the same game. There are some minor differences more in terms of the content that is here, not in terms of the base game itself. And to that end, if you want to check out my full thoughts on that, you can go ahead and check out my review of Foundations of Rome. I will reference those thoughts here, but let's talk briefly about what this game is so you get a general idea of how to play this game. And to that end, this is going to be a polyomino area control game that takes place across 3 rounds. Players are going to be fighting over a shared grid over here. Over here, the players are going to be operating. There's a shared metropolis over here. Right now, we have the 2-player side of the board. There's another 3 to 4 player side of the board. And what players are going to do on their turn is they take one of 3 actions. They are either going to collect income. When they collect income, they're going to take 5 money plus additional money if they've built any money buildings. So if this building were on the board somehow, then they get 5 plus 3 because they have this 3 over here. And you can just look over here and take a look and you see, hey, I have 3 uncovered, add that to my 5, I get 8 money. That's the basic idea of taking money. The next thing they can do is they can reserve a lot. Players are going to start the game with 6 slots on the board, either randomly given, or you can play with the alternate draft mode that I do definitely recommend playing with once you know the game. But you're going to start with 6 slots on the board, as you can see over here. But on your turn, you can say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take D2 over here. I'm purple. What do I want? Do I want D2? Yeah, D2 is next to me. I'm going to pay 3 money, and I'm going to take D2. I pay 3 money to the bank. I take D2, and I add it to my stack of lots. I take this over here. I take a lot marker. I put it there, because in order to build, you're going to have sections of lots. So this is an important thing you're going to be trying to do in the game. Then you're going to go ahead and have more of these come out. We're going to pick another card over here. This is a 3+ player. We have set up for a 2-player game. Here we go. We got another card over here. That's basically the way you have reserving a lot. You pay 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, or 10. You reserve the lot, and then you place your lot marker there. You cannot do this if you are out of lot markers in the game. That's the second action. So we have collect income, we have collect a lot or buy a lot, and the third action is build a building. When you build a building, you take a look at your personal player board. You don't actually pay any costs. All costs are paid for. Well, I actually don't know, because in Foundations of Rome, all costs are paid for by the Emperor of Rome, but I don't imagine in Foundations of Metropolis they are paid for by the Emperor of Rome, and knowing the government, I don't imagine the government's paying for it either. Let's pretend your rich uncle. Your rich uncle is paying for all your lots. The rule book might say who pays the lots, I don't know. But either way, the lots, just go ahead, once you have the lot, you pay for the lot itself, but the buildings you can just place down on any spot that you have a section for. So for example, I can take this right now and say, I'm going to take this and I'm going to replace this spot over here. I get these markers back, which means I can now get more lots again. And I now have a building on the board. This building is going to give me 1 point. It's going to give me 1 point over here, 1 coin whenever I collect income. So you're going to be getting money whenever you take a collect income action. And that's where your player board is divided into 3 areas, which we'll talk about briefly. So those are the core 3 actions. You can either collect money, you can buy a lot, or you can go ahead and build on a collection of lots that you have. Now, there are some intricacies we won't heavily get into, specifically the idea of overbuilding on your own lots. I'll loosely get into it, but don't worry if you don't understand. You can reference the rulebook at any point. The basic idea is during the course of the game, you can overbuild. You can overbuild on top of any lots you have. So, for example, if I currently have this set up on the board, I can instead say, I'm going to go ahead and overbuild, replacing these with those. And you have that opportunity in the game to do that. The only real catch is you can only overbuild your own buildings, and if you overbuild, you can never overbuild a like size or greater building. So in other words, if a size 3 building can overbuild any number of 2s and 1s combined, but you can't overbuild a size 3 with a size 3. So you always have to be going up a tier compared to whatever you're overbuilding. Again, there's some nuances to that, but that's the basic idea of overbuilding, although it is a key part of the strategy of the game, especially once you start being mean and cutthroat. So that's the general idea of how you're going to be building over there, and your player board is going to be divided up into 3 areas. You have your economy buildings, which will help you get money when you take the collect money action. You have your residential buildings, which when you place these, so for example, when I overbuilt, maybe I took a pivot and I took away some of the money, but I put this out over here, and now I suddenly have 4 population, so I'm going to mark my population tracker over here, and I now have the most population. That's important because at the end of each of the 3 rounds, you're going to be getting points based on your population, or more specifically, you get points based on your population. Well, let's go ahead and show it to you. Let's just pretend right now, we had this as the situation at the end of round 1. So at the end of round 1, the end of the round occurs, by the way, when this entire stack is is gone, and then these cards are also all gone. That's when the ends year 1. We do the same with year 2 and year 3. And the way purple would score is purple would score 8, which is their population, plus a bonus of 4. And that bonus changes in year 2 to 7 and changes in year 3 to 10. So you get different bonuses each year as you go through it, versus the next place gets points equal to the person before him, or in front of him. So in this case, blue would get 8 points versus 8 would get 12. And then depending on the player count, the person behind blue would get blue score. So you're always kind of getting the score of whoever's ahead of you, as long as you have at least one population. You do have to have at least one in order to do that. And that's going to be one of the ways you're scoring in the game. The third part of your player board is up here you have all these civic buildings. These buildings score based on what they're next to. So each round they're going to score points if you're next to, let's take this one over here. This one's going to be scoring 1 point for every population it's next to. So if it's touching this population building, and let's say we have another population building over here from blue, so this is going to be a point for every population. So this is worth 10 points because there's 10 population touching it. That's often why you want to dabble in overbuilding, by the way, because overbuilding is a great way to sweep the legs out from the person who just built next to your population and they're getting points next to your population. You're like, fun, joke's on you. I'm suddenly interested in getting a bit more money and denying you those points. So overbuilding is going to be a key part of the strategy in the game. That's the general idea of the game. At the end of each round, you're going to score for your civic buildings. You're going to score for your population build. You're going to score for your population based on the population track, and that's basically what you're going to do across 3 rounds of play. That is how you play Foundations of Metropolis. And again, potentially some small things I missed. This is meant to be more of a general overview, not a rules aspect. And let's talk about, before we dive into my thoughts and opinions, let's talk about Foundations of Rome, the differences between the 2 games, and then my thoughts and opinions on Foundations of Rome before we dive into Foundations of Metropolis. And to that end, this is Foundations of Rome. There's not really a difference between this and Foundations of Rome past the components and then the additional expansions. Those are where you're going to see the differences. The base gameplay is the same. I believe the one thing I may have caught as a difference is I believe the original Foundations of Rome had 2 ways to score the population, and it looks like in the rulebook here, assuming I read it correctly, it looks like they only went with the suggested way, or maybe the advanced mode of scoring population, which is the way I've always personally played, so I'm not against that, but I think that's the only real difference I've caught as far as base game. Instead of giving you 2 scoring opportunities for how population scores, they just gave you the one that they suggest anyways. Past that, it's the same base game. Now, what you are going to be missing out on are going to be different components and then the expansion modules. So if you are someone who's been interested in Foundations of Rome, first of all, Foundations of Rome has an expansion, which I haven't even played yet, but that's going to be, the expansion in general won't be present over here. Additionally, you will not have the giant 3D polyomino detailed buildings. You're going to have you will have these player trays, by the way, and these player trays are a big deal. They made sure to have this because this makes everything so much easier. It makes setup, tear down, accessibility, visibility. It makes all those things significantly better having these player trays, and they made sure to keep those in. They're just doing so with polyominoes instead of giant deluxe miniatures. You're going to be missing the various modules and expansions of the base game that the original Foundations of Rome had. So you're missing the 5th player expansion. You're missing the monuments, and that's a big deal. It's going to factor into my rating of this game. You're missing the monuments. You're missing the bartering, stealing, the events, the personas, all these various little modules and expansion that Foundations of Rome had isn't present here. They have the base game, and then they have the draft variant, where you can draft your starting cards instead of anything else. But outside of that, if you're just looking at base game to base game, Foundations of Metropolis is the same gameplay as the base game of Foundations of Rome. You are missing out. You're changing the components. You're also changing the price point. Changing the components does come at a cheaper price point, and then you're losing out on all the expansions and modules. Speaking of price point, that is something we should touch upon, because half of the point of this game is to make the gameplay of Foundations of Rome accessible to those who aren't interested in dropping $200 on a deluxe polyomino experience. And make no mistake, Foundations of Rome is a deluxe polyomino experience. My overall rating of Foundations of Rome was a 4.5 out of 5. I love the game. I definitely think the table presence definitely enhances the game to me, but it's a game that is easy to teach, easy to play. It is mean and cutthroat to those who want to play it that way. It is less mean and cutthroat to those who just want to have a nice, fun little point scoring experience. There's a lot of ways to mix up the gameplay with the various expansions. I always play with monuments, always. I think I played one game without monuments just to test it out, and I definitely feel that I do need monuments in the game to make it that extra level of something else going on. It's a little variable game to game. And then the other expansions or modules I've used at different points. I've used bartering, I've used stealing, I've used the personas, I've used the events, I've used all these things at one point or another just to try them out. My go-to is monuments, but there are a bunch of fun modules to mix around with in different ways if you want that variability. and that's going to be missing from this over here. But again, the price point is going to be a quarter of the price point or less, depending on what version or things you're getting over there. Which brings me to my thoughts on this. And again, Foundations of Rome is a 4.5 out of 5 to me. The reason for that is the mix of accessible, easy to understand, and easy to play gameplay, the sheer speed and setup of teardown. Like, it takes 4 minutes to set up, 4 minutes to tear down. It is an easy game to get to the table and gives you a strategically satisfying experience for that relative to the game weight. It gives you an incredibly strategic experience that plays well at a variety of player counts. As far as Foundations of Metropolis, I'm going to focus purely on the differences here as opposed to a full in-depth review of all the things. Because again, if you want that, you can watch my video Foundations of Rome, but I've kind of hit upon the keynotes. I think that the accessibility of the rules and the teach and the setup and the teardown versus the strategic depth of what you're doing is why I like this system. And I like it in Foundations of Metropolis as well. Where Foundations of Metropolis shines over the original Foundations of Rome is going to be the price point for price point is going to be a factor. But if you already have Foundations of Rome, as I do I need this? Do I care about this? Does this give me any value? And the answer is yes, by the way, for 2 reasons. First of all, I do like the theme and the colors. The color palette is beautiful. I mean, like this blue, like I love the colors over here. They're great. They're accessible. The art looks beautiful. I don't know why I said the colors are accessible. The art looks beautiful. Everything, the theme is a nice theme. I like the little building up the city aspect. So the theme and presentation is beautiful. That would not be enough for me to have both these games, though. The reason I'm happy Foundations of Metropolis exists, even as an owner of Foundations of Rome, is the fact that Foundations of Rome has never left my house. I don't take it to game night. We play it at my house or we play something else instead because it's a giant box. And yes, you could carry it. Yes, you could put it into a I'll Play board game bag or whatnot. Not sponsored by I'll Play. But you could put it into a board game bag or whatever it is and cart it around. But I just don't feel the need to. There are other games I'm always happy to play. Foundations of Rome does not leave my house. Versus Foundations of Metropolis will leave my house. It will all the time leave my house. I will miss the monuments. Honestly, the one thing I wish and I still hope, Arcane Wonders, if you're able to put out a little monuments expansion for Foundations of Metropolis, that would make my day, because all the other aspects I could relegate to, hey, you know what, I'll play with the events some other time. I'll play with all these other things some other time. Or 5th player. I don't think the game is as good with 5 players. I prefer other player counts, so I'll play with that some other time. I do wish that there was an expansion for the monuments, because that's something that I always play with, and that's the one thing I would feel is missing out. Meaning, if it had the monuments, this would be a no-brainer to me to own just for the accessibility of being able to travel with it. The extra theme and differences in presentation, that's a nice plus, but I wouldn't want to own a full other copy of a game just for that. Versus the ability to have my Foundations of Rome that I play with, and then cart this to someone else's house when I want to play there. That is a value to me. The problem is it comes at the cost of playing with the monuments, which I don't love, frankly. And to that end, that's going to factor into my overall rating of this game. I think Foundations of Metropolis, to me, it is a 4 out of 5. The original Foundations of Rome is a 4.5 out of 5, but when you're looking at the packages, the cost differential versus the production differential, that kind of washes out. Yes, I do think I get a more enhanced, more immersive game experience when I'm building out this giant city of polyomino presentation. I think it looks beautiful, and I think it adds to the game. But also it comes at a hefty price point, and so those things kind of balance out as far as the overall rating aspect of this, making this more accessible, taking away a little bit from that washes out. Where it loses half a point for me is the lack of the various expansions and modules, specifically and most importantly the monuments, but honestly the whole package of all of them together. I still think this is a delightful game. I still am happy to own this one in addition to Foundations of Rome. I definitely recommend this one if you have been interested in playing Foundations of Rome, but the price point has understandably scared you off. If you want to try something that's going to give you most of that strategic gameplay, but at a much more accessible price point, then I think Foundations of Metropolis is worth checking out. I do really, really hope that Arcane Wonders puts a Monuments expansion out, because it really adds to the game experience. It really does add to the game experience. I hope I don't know what the plans are, but I hope that's in their plans, because I feel bad for those who are getting Foundations of Metropolis and then missing out on something that's just a nice little element of gameplay. And it's not essential. I don't want to harp on it too much. It's not like, you'll still have a great time. I've had a great time playing this. I just think that it adds such a low rules overhead and a degree of something that mixes up the experience and makes it more engaging. So I do like and recommend that expansion. Well, again, for Arcane Wonders to make it for this game. That's basically my review of Foundations of Metropolis. It is a mostly the same version of a game of another game that I already love, but now at a price point that many others can get their hands on this one, and I recommend that you do so if you haven't already, or at the very least try it out. At the very least try it out sometime at a convention or who knows where, see if it's a game for you. I think this is a very rewarding and accessible experience that the rules overhead versus the depth of play is such a good ratio. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.